Kuzangpo and a very warm welcome to yet another edition of Bhutan This Week with me, Tandin Finso. Our main story is His Majesty the King grants an audience to the Indian External Affairs Minister. Her Majesty the Queen Mother, Sri Wong Chuk, inaugurates the 7th edition of the Royal Bhutan Flower Exhibition. And Australia reassures Bhutan of continued official development support. His Majesty the King granted an audience to S. Jaishankar, the External Affairs Minister of India, in the capital last week. The minister arrived in the country on 29th April for a 2-day official visit.
The minister is on a 2-day official visit at the invitation of the Foreign Minister, Dr. Tandi Dorji. This is the first high-level official visit since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. The minister also received an audience with His Majesty the 4th Druk Gyalpo earlier this morning. In the afternoon, the External Affairs Minister handed over a medical consignment to Limpo Tandi Dorji. The two ministers virtually inaugurated the Bajo Khuru Secondary National Highway, the 4-lane Jungshina Chubachu Highway, and the bus terminal of Bumthang. Following the inaugurations, they also had a meeting to discuss matters of mutual interest. Later in the evening, the minister called on the Prime Minister Dr. Lote Sring. It is in keeping with the long-established tradition of regular exchange of high-level visits between the two countries. The visit is expected to further strengthen the already existing close ties of friendship and cooperation between the two countries. Sam Tendolkar, BBS News.
His Majesty the King granted citizenship Kidu to more than 300 people at the Tendetha last week. The recipients took part in a ceremony to take the oath of allegiance to the Salsum as citizens of Bhutan. Since becoming the king, His Majesty has granted citizenship Kidu to 24,000 people. Her Majesty the Queen Mother, Sri Wong Chuk, inaugurated the 7th edition of the Royal Bhutan Flower Exhibition on Monday. It was held in Mongar. The exhibition this year was dedicated to His Majesty the 3rd Druk Gyalpo. The inauguration was held coinciding with His Majesty's birth anniversary.
Her Majesty the Gyalum, the royal patron of the Royal Bhutan Flower Exhibition, was accompanied by His Royal Highness Gyalsab Jigme Dorji Wangchuk and Aji Tsolhamo. The exhibition was initiated upon the royal command of His Majesty the King in 2015 and is carried out by the Ministry of Agriculture and Forests with the help of the host Dzongkhag and other relevant agencies. In line with the royal vision for the exhibition, the successive editions held in Poro, Thimphu, Punakha, Samdrup Jongkhar and Ha have extended beyond the main venue to develop permanent installations, public parks and spaces in towns for the benefit and enjoyment of residents.
Before the inception of the Royal Bhutan Flower Exhibition, Mongar town was not that much good place to hang around and for the recreational purpose. But with the inauguration of the Royal Bhutan Flower Exhibition, the place has been changed a lot, where we can walk around with a clean and very scenic place around, and we can have a good time around. I'm very much grateful for His Majesty the King and the royal families and the government for coming up with such program here in Mongolia.
Tata to sani gi thega hedi beru teta kara 당에 만날바 되다 세마베 다지 셰사다 아니 사고티 메베디 다도베던 다다 날바 가라 메토뎀딘 나메쇼칼로 되다 가라 되다 마차리 박숨베 되다 랑사기 자짱 알로디스다 지켜야 되다 나시니 짠니 되니기 나미 세멜레심베 아시시 주닐라 마치 몽거디 때 짱다기 태칼레 베데베로다에 텔레 ngo singdang ngo jangi den le meto disu daw mado disu chu dele nga chigi ta lena disu daw mado nyamale bedi yemegulu khakon daw mado la chichira nga chigi be chu
This year, the Gilpushing College of Information Technology is partnering with the Royal Bhutan Flower Exhibition to allow viewers from across the country to experience the event. The virtual experience will be launched on 21st May on the website flora.bt. Samtin Dolkar, BBS News.
The government has allowed incoming travellers to opt for home quarantine since Monday. All incoming Bhutanese, diplomats, expatriates and foreign nationals married to Bhutanese are eligible to apply for the home quarantine. They will now no longer have to undergo the 5-day mandatory facility quarantine.
Moving on to the second phase of COVID management in the country, the government started cautious relaxations of COVID restrictions in March. Since then, a series of relaxations were announced, and the latest is for international travellers. According to a press release from the Prime Minister's office issued earlier today, inbound travellers can now apply for home quarantine with the Health Ministry. Respective regional task forces and quarantine facility management unit will facilitate the approval. Home quarantine protocol incorporates quarantine for 5 days as the day of arrival is marked as day 0. The home quarantine ends only if the individual tests negative on the 6th day. However, incoming travellers are not eligible for home quarantine if their journey to the destination requires a night halt. The travellers have to declare the approval letter at the point of entry and arrange their transportation from the point of entry to the residence of quarantine. For the individuals, to avoid contacting people on the way, private cars will be labelled with stickers by the authority. In case the traveller tests positive, they will be made to isolate for 7 more days from the day of the test and end home quarantine on the 7th day without testing. During home quarantine, the movement of the same household members will also be restricted. According to the notification, they will be monitored by the authority and any breach of protocols will be dealt with accordingly. Meanwhile, the government recommends not choosing home quarantine if there are vulnerable household members such as the elderly and unvaccinated children at home. Kinzang Haden, BBS News.
The first batch of monks who underwent a PhD in Buddhist Studies from Dorden Tashithang Buddhist University in Thimphu graduated on Tuesday. It is the first time the central monastic body offered the 3-year PhD program to the monks in the country.
The 4 PhD graduates were awarded a new title, Rikchikebi Chokzin. Dojulebe, Gelsichuku and other dignitaries attended the ceremony. The program was instituted to further strengthen monastic education.
Tatani nyamale yumirjul bende kalu toru richikebi chozin se losungiri no anigi jamot beda bajin achirgi pusulu shin kakon tomni imbe sete anile tendi tutsuis
tatutsun jigi panalo tengachi nale jung tasagi shida kha katna indibesture jindagu ba sambe tedim chibi luideno bala tanale be tanana ba gomte chipo masoyo bala chi tatutsun tanigi tangachira to zulolubeta lesulube ngachira nagi jizin gon tesugi de kadin tinde betina ta ngachigi gomte tamachi pugo beseta deshizuchi zenango bese kanna be.
The graduates will now serve as teachers in their respective shedras. A monk should have a master's degree in Buddhist Studies to pursue PhD. The second batch of the PhD students will be selected tomorrow. Choni Dhamma for BBS News.
As Bhutan prepares to graduate from the least developed countries group by next year, the Australian government has reassured that Bhutan will continue to be eligible for official development assistance. This was confirmed by the First Secretary of Australia High Commission in New Delhi in an exclusive virtual interview with BBS last week.
Bhutan will continue to be eligible for official development assistance following graduation. So I hope that other foreign and development partners will not to leave Bhutan. For Australia's part, our bilateral engagement with Bhutan, including our development cooperation, will reflect and adapt to Bhutan's growing economy and any shifts in development priorities.
This year marks the 20th years of the establishment of formal diplomatic ties between Bhutan and Australia. Reflecting on this two-decade-long bilateral relationship, the Australian government's main assistance to Bhutan has been in the area of human resource development. It has provided unstinted support in grooming Bhutanese professionals through its various educational programs, including the prestigious Australia Awards scholarships.
A total of 21 Bhutanese professionals from the civil service, corporate bodies and tourism backed the Australia Awards scholarships for intake 2021 and 2022. At the pre-departure briefing organised by the Australia Awards country office in the capital yesterday, BBS caught up with 37-year-old Sangipunso. He is one of the recipients of this scholarship, which is the most desired scholarship by many white-collar workers in Bhutan. After waiting for one whole year due to the COVID travel restrictions, he is excited that he will soon be leaving for Australia to attend face-to-face learning at a world-class university. Sangye will be studying Masters in Strategic Studies at the Australian National University in Canberra.
We are very much aware that we should fill that gap of a critical human resource requirement in the country. And as an Australian recipient of the prestigious Australian Award scholarship, I am very much aware that I need to build my capacity, learn knowledge and skills, build professional networking, and come back to the country and fill the gap of this critical human resource shortage in the country.
Another recipient is 41-year-old Kunzang Lhamo, a teacher from Sakting Lower Secondary School in Tashkang. Having served in one of the most remote schools, she considers this scholarship as a pivotal tool to empower rural students, especially girls.
I've seen that only maybe 20% of the girls continue their education after the primary schooling. So I would like to maybe boost that ability or the confidence in the girls to continue their education and be women leaders in future.
Other recipients also shared their professional endeavours after completing their masters and return to the country.
While in Australia, I intend to engage myself or basically actively in the academic activities or learning, and besides I would also like to engage actively with the professional organizations, including the urban planners, architects, landscape architects in Australia.
I will be able to expedite my career advancement, and with the skills and knowledge that will be gained through this scholarship, I will enable to develop and contribute towards the development of my organization.
Including these awardees, about 2,000 Bhutanese from diverse professional backgrounds underwent long-term and short-term courses under Australian government scholarships till date. One of the commissioners of the Royal Civil Service Commission stressed that the scholarship will play an influential role in refraining civil servants from becoming obsolete. As Bhutan stands at the critical juncture where the investment in human capital is accorded utmost importance, bilateral aid in human resource development such as Australia Awards scholarships will be greatly helpful. Pemal Harden, BBS News.
Bhutan was ranked 33 in the Global Press Freedom Rankings this year, a significant jump from last year's position of 65. The report is published by Reporters Without Borders, a Paris-based international campaign group. The group has been monitoring the level of freedom available to the media in 180 countries and territories for the past 2 decades. Meanwhile, journalists in the country say the step-up could be due to worsening media freedom elsewhere instead of the progress in the country. The report was published on Tuesday.
The Reporters Without Borders has defined press freedom as the effective possibilities for journalists as individuals and as groups to select, produce and disseminate news and information in the public interest independently from political, economic, legal and social interference and without threats to their physical and mental safety. The score is based on 5 indicators, which are political context, legal framework, economic context, socio-cultural context, and safety. Bhutan's ranking has been dragged down by legislative and social indicators this time. It means problems such as appointment of members of media regulatory body directly by the government, difficulty in getting access to state-held information, and self-censorship by journalists in the country are some of the factors.
If you look at the scores more closely, in 2021 our score was 71.14 and in 2022 it is 76.46. So there's not a huge movement in scores. So I suspect it has more to do with other countries not doing well, which may explain why we are moving so high up the rankings.
We have higher level of safety in Bhutan for journalists, and then I believe with safety, you can always we have better environment to work here in Bhutan. But then coming to the flow of information, I'm still skeptic about the information flow.
If others look at it, it is very nice to hear about it. But because it is us who are in the field and we know how the situation is. Personally, I feel like this ranking is not valid. Last year, I personally experienced so many difficulties while trying to access information.
While the country's rankings had a big leap, journalists in the country say it could fall next year.
Looking at the current situation, it is even worse. We do not get certain information that we used to before. Even getting access to a simple data has become difficult.
I think the challenge for journalism in Bhutan still continues to be access to information, a small market, small society and societal pressures. So we have a long way to go.
This year's score means the country has a satisfactory media environment. Meanwhile, Norway emerged as the top performer, while North Korea is the worst performing country on the World Press Freedom Index 2022. Samten Dolkar, PBS News.
The recent incident at the Supreme Court left many people questioning the security in the court. An ACC official was left injured after the former Tongsa Zongda, Labdoji, stabbed him with a knife outside the courtroom. It happened just after the Supreme Court passed the judgment in the Tongsa land scam case recently.
It was a landmark victory for the ACC. They registered the case with the Tongsa District Court in 2017 after the OIG dismissed the case, saying it did not merit criminal proceedings. It came a long way and they got the conviction. But a security lapse at the Supreme Court almost proved costly. According to the Supreme Court, there were no police to escort the convicts to the prison after the court passed its judgment convicting all the appellants. As the convicts and the investigators walked out of the courtroom, there was an altercation. Without enough security at the scene, it was learned that most of the people there got involved. And then the former Zongda stabbed the ACC official. The Registrar General of the Supreme Court said Thimphu police were informed to be at the Supreme Court by 2:30 p.m. on that day. He said one of the lawyers called the police at about 11:25 a.m. He also said the lawyer reminded the police at about 2:15 p.m., but no one showed up. The lawyer was later told that the police could not come on time owing to a manpower shortage. The police showed up later after the commotion at the Supreme Court and escorted everyone involved, including 3 children of Labdoji, to the police station. The Thimphu District Court has denied the bail of the children yesterday until the investigation is completed. It is still not clear how Labdoji snaked the knife inside the court. According to the police, it is being investigated. They, however, completed gathering statements from all witnesses who were present during the incident as part of their investigation. Bimasaldan Singh, BBS News.
The government's decision to admit all Class 10 graduates into government schools has worried the private high schools in the country. Following the announcement of the Class 10 results last month, the government decided to stop providing new scholarships to private schools. The government has been providing scholarships to thousands of students to study in private schools for the past few years.
The decision to absorb all Class 10 graduates into government schools was not received well by most of the private schools in the country. Some of the private school teachers said the decision will leave most of them without the means to make a living.
I think it is not that private schools were not contributing to the government's economy in the form of tax. Huge amount of money is being paid by the private schools in the form of tax that becomes the government's revenue actually.
This is one kind of a blow to us. And we even heard that actually private are given more important, utmost important by the throne. But today when we hear that this kind of news, it is quite alarming for us.
Meanwhile, the education minister said they do not have any definite plans in place for the teachers in the private schools. Some private schools are worried that they might have to bring down the shutters on the schools very soon. However, according to the Education Ministry, the decision was not taken overnight. While the government assured scholarships to the private schools during the last parliament session, the condition was that students will be enrolled in private schools only if the government schools cannot absorb all the Class 10 graduates. Currently, there are more seats available in the government schools than the number of Class 10 graduates. According to the ministry, there are more than 10,000 seats available in the 75 higher secondary schools across the country. Only about 9,000 Class 10 students passed the BCSE exams this year. Meanwhile, the decision will affect 20 private higher secondary schools across the country. For Karmawangdi, Kiletem, PBS News.
Before the construction of roads, Bhutanese used ancient trails for economic, political and social purposes. Reviving the country's ancient east-west route, Trans-Bhutan Trail Initiative is in its final phase. The trail will be covering 403-kilometer route from Ha to Tashigang.
Under the Trans-Bhutan Trail project, amenities such as toilets and resting areas are being installed. To guide the hikers and to provide history about a certain place, around 130 sustainable marker poles with a QR code will also be placed along the entire trail.
So if we scan the marker pole here, you'll get detailed information about the place. We have around 130 poles that will be installed in places such as Chendipji and Zhongarzong. The poles will be installed starting from Ha to Tashigang. We are here today to install the first marker pole to kickstart the work.
We reached Trongsa in 12 days from Tashigang on foot during the first survey. The trail was covered with thick bushes and we faced a lot of problems. But we also learned many new things. About 30% of the ancient trails are now covered by modern roads. Since the 1960s, ancient trails are not used much, so it is covered with thick forests and bushes.
The trail is expected to contribute to the recovery of the tourism industry. Since 2019, the project has employed over 900 Bhutanese who lost their livelihoods due to the pandemic. Bhutan Canada Foundation and the government funded the project, which is expected to be complete by the end of this year. So far, about 48 million Ngutam has been spent on restoration works. Hiking along the ancient route will be a new experience for many younger generations and visitors who want an in-depth exploration of Bhutan's traditions and culture. Sringdandup, BBS News.
That's all we have for you this week. Thank you for joining us. This is Tanir Funso saying goodbye.